She found it behind her shed, a ball of spotted fur barely breathing. Neighbors shouted warnings. "It's a wild predator. You'll regret this." But 27-year-old Allison Ray didn't listen. The animal was a bobcat, wild and wounded, its eyes glazed with fear. Everyone expected her to call animal control, to walk away. Instead, she opened her door and her heart. What happened next would shake the entire small town of Redding, California, and rewrite the line between danger and devotion. Because sometimes the wild chooses you, and no one could predict how far this bond would go, or what it would cost. The girl who didn't turn away. Sometimes the wild doesn't come to test you. It comes to choose you. Nestled at the edge of the Shasta Trinity National Forest in Redding, California, there stood a weather-worn cabin, its cedar shingles faded silver by the sun and wind. The land around it was a patchwork of moss-covered stones, towering redwoods, and untamed brush that rustled in the whispering breeze. In that quiet world, away from traffic lights and coffee shop chatter, lived a woman who had long since decided that solitude wasn't something to fear. It was something to embrace. Her name was Allison Ray. At 27, Allison looked like someone who belonged to the forest more than the town. She was tall but lithe, with lean arms, hardened from splitting wood and hauling water. Her long, auburn hair was usually tied in a lazy braid that trailed over her shoulder like a vine, and her green eyes held a sharpness that often made people hesitate. There was a wildness in them, something feral, like the wind. She wore threadbare jeans and thick flannel shirts even when the California heat beat down hard. Her boots were always muddy. On her right arm, just beneath the elbow, a faded tattoo of a raven perched on a pine branch hinted at a past that no one ever asked her about. She didn't talk much, not because she didn't have anything to say, but because no one stuck around long enough to listen. Allison lived alone in the cabin her grandmother had left her 2 years earlier when she passed from a stroke. The place was isolated enough that the nearest neighbor was half a mile down the dirt road, and the only regular visitor was the UPS driver who left packages at the gate. She worked part-time for the state's conservation office, cataloging wildlife photography. The rest of her income came from private freelance work, documenting rare species, tracking trails, sometimes even consulting for environmental documentaries. She had a gift for spotting things others missed, a rustle that wasn't wind, a trail that didn't belong to deer, a cry in the night that wasn't just an owl. And she liked it that way. The townsfolk, though, had always seen her as a little off. They'd whisper when she came into Redding for supplies. "That Ray girl talks to trees," one clerk muttered once. "Carries a camera like it's a gun," said another. Still, Allison never gave them reason to think otherwise. She kept her distance, from the world, from people, from grief, until that morning. It began like any other. A slow crawl of sunlight spilled through the cabin's single, east-facing window. Coffee bubbled on the stovetop. Birds chirped high in the cedar trees. Then, a sound, faint, like a whimper carried by the wind. It came from behind the woodshed. And in that moment, Allison's quiet world would shift forever. Because what she found there wasn't just a wounded animal. It was the beginning of a story no one would believe. What Allison saw behind that shed would challenge every instinct, every warning, and every rule of survival she'd ever lived by. Fear is louder than truth, but love listens anyway. The first glance. The cry came again, soft, desperate, nearly lost in the wind. Allison stepped off the porch barefoot, her coffee cooling on the windowsill. Her boots crunched over gravel as she rounded the corner of the woodshed, heart thrumming just slightly faster. She expected to see a raccoon, maybe a rabbit caught in something, but nothing could have prepared her for what was actually there. At the base of the woodshed, hidden under a tangle of blackberry brambles, lay a tiny creature, its fur wet and matted, speckled with dirt and dried blood. The little body trembled violently, barely bigger than a house cat, with an angular face and oversized paws that didn't belong to any domestic animal. It was a bobcat kitten. At first, Allison just stared, breath caught in her throat. She took a step closer. The kitten hissed, baring sharp little teeth, but it was a weak threat. One of its hind legs was twisted, at an unnatural angle, and a dark, fresh gash ran along its shoulder blade. Its eyes, milky, amber-ringed and full of panic, locked with hers. No mother in sight. No movement in the surrounding trees. No sound but the shallow wheezing of its breath. Allison crouched, her knees crunching against the fallen pine needles. Her brain screamed at her to call fish and wildlife. Animal control, a veterinarian, anyone. This was a wild animal, a predator, even if it was just a baby. But her hands didn't move for her phone. Instead, they reached for the edge of her flannel, tearing a strip from the hem to press against the bleeding wound. The kitten flinched, let out a rasping snarl, but didn't strike. "You're not supposed to be here," she whispered, "and I'm not supposed to help you." Still, her fingers worked with calm purpose. She scooped him up gently, swaddling him in the rest of her shirt like a fragile bundle. The weight was feather-light, no more than 4 or 5 pounds. His ribs protruded, his breathing rattled. Inside the cabin, she cleared the workbench, laid him down on a fleece towel, grabbed peroxide, gauze, a shallow bowl of warm water. Her hands moved like they'd done this before. In a way, they had. Allison had grown up helping her grandmother tend to animals, injured birds, limping foxes, even a baby owl once found fallen from its nest. That old woman had taught her to listen before judging, to look closer, to feel deeper. But this was different. This was a bobcat. She pulled out her Nikon from the top shelf and snapped a photo. Not for the internet, not for fame. For documentation, for accountability. Maybe proof, later. She didn't even realize her hands were shaking. The sun was climbing, time ticking. She knew she had hours at most to stabilize him, or lose him. And when the kitten finally stopped hissing and began to shiver quietly in her arms, she gave him a name. Bramble, she murmured, because he was wild, wounded, and growing thorns, just like her. By nightfall, the warnings began. Neighbors saw something. Rumors spread. But Allison had already made her choice, and so had Bramble, the wild heart in her hands. Sometimes, saving something wild means learning to let go of your fear, raising the impossible. The first night was a war between instinct and will. Bramble lay curled inside a makeshift crate Allison had fashioned from an old laundry basket and thick fleece. A hot water bottle, wrapped in cloth, pulsed beneath his frail chest, giving him a sense of warmth and heartbeat. He didn't sleep, neither did she. Allison sat across the room on the floor, her knees drawn to her chest, watching him, like the flickering wick of a candle about to die out. Every shallow breath felt like a countdown. By morning, he still hadn't eaten. She boiled chicken, shredded it with her fingers, mixed it with kitten formula, and spoon-fed him drop by drop. He bit the spoon twice, hissed once, then swallowed. That was the moment she knew he had a chance. And that was the moment everything began to change. She named him Bramble because of how he came to her, tangled and sharp, hidden beneath the wild. But over the following weeks, he became something more, a creature balanced between two worlds. He had spots along his back, and faint white tufts on the backs of his ears that twitched at every sound. His legs were longer than expected for his size, and his tail, a stubby bob with a black tip, flicked like a warning bell when he was agitated. His eyes, though, his eyes were a storm, amber gold and wild. By week 2, Bramble could limp from his basket to the edge of the rug, dragging his injured paw slightly. She wrapped it, every morning, rubbed salve into the torn pad. He tolerated it with slow-growing trust. He also began to test her. At first, it was innocent, pouncing on her slippers, hiding beneath the kitchen table. Then came the biting, playful, but sharp. One morning, she leaned too close and he swiped a claw across her cheek, opening a thin, red line. Allison didn't flinch. She simply whispered, "You're still learning," and backed away. But the outside world was not so forgiving. On her weekly grocery run, she overheard two local women whispering near the freezer section. "She's still out there alone, right? Living in that cabin?" "Yeah, and I heard she's keeping a bobcat. Saw her buying raw meat last week." "Dangerous. They should call someone." Allison kept walking, her head high, her hands steady on the cart handle. But the words stuck like burrs. She called the local vet to ask for advice. The receptionist cut her off as soon as she mentioned bobcat. "That's not legal to keep, ma'am. Best call animal control before someone else does." Click. Still, she pressed on. Her nights were filled with research, learning about bobcat growth cycles, diets, territory instincts. She built Bramble a climbing tower from cedar logs, reinforced every window screen, and began training him with gentle commands and hand signals. But no matter how much she read or prepared, nothing could teach her how deeply she would come to care for him. Each morning, Bramble greeted her with a soft chuff, circling her legs before racing across the room. He followed her into the garden, sniffing every bloom, batting curiously at buzzing insects. He'd sleep at her feet while she edited photos, his breathing slow and even. She never forgot he was wild, but he never gave her a reason to fear him. Not yet. But as the months passed and Bramble grew stronger, bigger, faster, so did the fear from those watching. And soon, the question wouldn't be whether Allison had saved him. It would be whether she could keep him. You can take the wild out of the woods, but not out of the heart. Shadows of instinct. By the time summer turned to amber, Bramble had tripled in size. What once fit inside a laundry basket now stood nearly knee-high at the shoulder. His coat had thickened into a sleek, mottled blend of cinnamon and rust, speckled with charcoal black rosettes. The white tufts on the backs of his ears had grown into bright signals of alertness, flicking with every sound beyond the cabin walls. He moved with the stealth of a shadow, padding silently across the floors, perching on windowsills, his body low and fluid, like spilled smoke. Allison had stopped calling him kitten weeks ago. Now, he was a predator in practice. And still, he came when she whistled. But the balance was shifting. One morning, while brushing out old hay from the tool shed, she felt something behind her. Bramble had leapt silently onto the shelf above, eyes locked on her shoulders. In a split second, he pounced, his claws extended, a game in his mind. She screamed, not from pain, but from shock. He stopped mid-air, claws grazed her shirt. No blood, just silence and breath and an awkward, tense pause. Bramble slinked away, tail twitching. That night, she noticed the claw marks on her flannel. She didn't throw the shirt away. She just started locking the shed. The next day, Frank Lohman showed up. He was her landlord, a wiry man in his late 60s with a limp from a war no one asked him about anymore. He'd heard the rumors, seen the faint trails in the grass near the cabin, maybe even glimpsed a shape in the woods. "I need to see him," Frank said, leaning on his cane. Allison hesitated, then stepped aside. Bramble appeared by the doorway, crouched low, watching with an unreadable gaze. "Jesus," Frank muttered. "That's no house cat." "He's not hurting anyone," she replied quickly. "Yet," Frank said, his tone flat, "you can't raise instinct out of something born with fangs." He dropped something at her feet, an old, scarred leather muzzle. "I used this on a coyote once," he added. "Didn't end well. Don't make me be the one to call them." She didn't pick it up. As Frank limped down the gravel drive, she could feel the walls closing in. Later that week, a neighbor's chickens went missing, 3 gone overnight. Blood, feathers, a broken fence, no prints, just drag marks. They knocked on her door. She said nothing. They walked away, but their eyes said everything. She stayed up all night watching Bramble sleep at the foot of her bed, curled tightly, chest rising and falling. Still, just an animal. Still hers. But the next morning, she noticed something new in his behavior. He had begun scent marking the porch steps, claiming territory. A silent warning to anything that wasn't her. The forest was no longer enough. The house was no longer just a sanctuary. It was becoming a den. And deep down, Allison knew what was coming. The line between safe and wild was thinning, like frost beneath a rising sun. And once Bramble crossed it, there'd be no leash strong enough to pull him back. Allison had saved him once. But saving him again might mean letting him go, or worse, choosing between the animal she loved and the world that feared him. Every bond has a cost. The closer you get, the harder it is to let go. Where love meets the line. By the time Bramble reached 9 months, he was almost unrecognizable from the frail bundle of fur Allison had cradled in her arms that spring. He now weighed over 25 pounds, his body lean but muscular, built for ambush and speed. His paws, silent as dusk, could crush dry pine cones without a sound. His teeth were fully grown, curved and ivory sharp. And his eyes, they had changed. Still amber, still haunting, but now steadier. Less fearful, more focused, less dependent, more wild. Allison felt it in the way he moved, restless, alert. He no longer slept curled at her feet, but preferred the windowsill, staring into the dark trees beyond the cabin like something was calling him back. He began waking at night, pacing. She'd hear the soft scratch of his claws across the wooden floorboards, circling the door, the windows, the porch. She tried to redirect his energy. In the backyard, she built an enclosure using repurposed livestock fencing and cedar beams. A playpen, she joked, though no one was laughing. She even added perches and climbing logs, scattered scent trails to keep him engaged. It worked, for a while. Until one night, she found the gate swung open. He was gone. Panic crushed her lungs as she sprinted into the woods, flashlight beam bouncing wildly. Her breath came in short gasps as she searched under bramble and brush, calling his name, heart hammering. She found him 2 hours later on the edge of her property, crouched near the stream. He was unharmed, but not alone. Feathers floated downstream. She never found the rest of the bird. The next morning, Allison awoke to find an envelope taped to her front door. Eviction notice. 30 days. No explanation needed. Just a signature at the bottom from Frank Lohman. And still, no knock. No confrontation. Just silence and finality. She stood barefoot on her porch, clutching the paper with white knuckles. Bramble sat B. It was then she understood. This was not a warning anymore. It was a message. She could give him up, or disappear. The next 3 nights were restless. She barely ate. Bramble sensed it. He watched her more closely, circling her when she moved from room to room, his soft growls gentle but protective. She packed slowly. Photos, journals, camera gear, cans of food, a solar charger, emergency meds, a wool blanket her grandmother had made. The final thing she folded was the flannel Bramble had torn months ago. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She didn't have to. The forest would know. At dawn, she opened the truck's tailgate. Bramble leapt in, without command. She looked back at the cabin one last time, the place where they had found and lost their place in the world. As she turned the key in the ignition, she whispered, not to him, but to the life they were leaving behind. You were home once, but Now we need a new one. The tires crunched down the gravel, swallowed by the trees. They didn't stop until the last power line disappeared. In the forest, there are no fences. But freedom comes with a price. And soon, both Allison and Bramble would learn what it truly meant to be wild. Together. When the world turns its back on you, the wild opens its arms. If you dare to trust it. Into the pines. They followed forgotten roads north, through Lassen and beyond, where gas stations became sparse, and the trees thickened into walls of green silence. Somewhere near the border of the Shasta National Forest and Trinity Alps Wilderness, Allison turned off the pavement and onto a barely visible dirt path. It led them into nothingness. No cell signal, no power lines, no porch lights in the distance, just trees. Endless, towering trees. Ponderosa pines, Douglas firs, and thick underbrush that clawed at the tires. When the road ended, she parked beside a clearing, beside a ridge, at least 7,000 feet above sea level. There stood a yurt she had purchased months ago, quietly, with cash, when she'd first realized that someday she and Bramble might need to disappear. It wasn't much, just 200 square feet of canvas over a pinewood frame, mounted on a platform she had pre-assembled during weekend trips. No running water, a small solar battery for lights, a fireproof safe tucked under the cot. It wasn't comfort, it was survival, but it was home. Bramble stepped from the truck like he already owned the place. His shoulders were higher now, his body heavier. He sniffed the air, ears flicking, and let out a soft growl. Not from fear, more like acknowledgement. They had crossed into a new world, one without fences. Over the next few weeks, Allison carved out a routine. Mornings were for firewood and foraging. She taught herself how to filter water from the nearby spring and ration canned food between hunting trips. At night, she journaled by lantern, documenting Bramble's development, the way his hunting crouch had evolved, how his coat thickened with the changing weather, how his behavior shifted with the lunar cycles. But nothing prepared her for the way he changed out here. Gone were the restless nights of pacing. Out here, Bramble slept soundly, curled in the moss under the yurt deck, or perched atop a low branch in a nearby tree. He hunted mice, rabbits, and on rare occasions brought back gifts. Once the remains of a grouse. He never tore up the yurt, never bit her again. They moved like a unit. He followed her on hikes, pausing when she paused, circling her when she was distracted. Once, while she gathered mushrooms near a rock outcrop, a black bear wandered within 20 feet. Bramble didn't charge. He simply positioned himself between her and the bear, back low, teeth bared, tail stiff. The bear eventually lumbered away. It wasn't just survival anymore, it was partnership. Still, Allison never stopped watching the horizon. One mistake, a wrong step, a close encounter with a ranger, a curious hiker, and it could all be over. Bramble was still illegal in the eyes of the law, still a danger in the eyes of the public, still a risk in every way. And yet, out here he was more alive than she'd ever seen him, and so was she. There were days she forgot what asphalt felt like beneath her boots, what email sounded like, what other people's voices did to her head. The silence out here wasn't empty. It was sacred. Every night, before crawling into her sleeping bag, she whispered the same promise to herself. As long as he chooses to stay, I will stay. But even the deepest bonds must face the test of distance. And soon, the forest would remind Allison just how fragile a promise can be when nature decides to rewrite the rules. Even the closest soul can drift when the wild calls louder than love. The vanishing point. It started with silence, a deeper kind than usual. Bramble hadn't returned by dusk. At first, Allison wasn't worried. He often roamed the surrounding forest during the day, mapping territory, testing limits. But he always came back by sundown, usually with a twitching rabbit or a dusting of snow on his ears. But this time, the trees stayed still. By midnight, her breath was fogging against the yurt's window, flashlight clutched in her shaking hand. She called softly into the dark. "Bramble! Boy, come on, where are you?" No answer. Not even an echo. She spent the night pacing, boots crunching snow just beyond the ring of firelight. The stars above her blinked coldly, unmoved by her fear. Coyotes howled in the distance, their voices long and lonely. By sunrise, panic had hollowed her out. She filled her pack with gauze, jerky, a bottle of peroxide, and the worn flannel shirt Bramble used to knead when he was a kitten. She followed his usual trails, scanning trees, rocks, every broken twig. She found nothing. Not even paw prints. Snow had fallen lightly overnight, enough to erase the world behind him. Hours passed. Her throat burned from calling. Her legs shook. Then, just before dusk, a sound. A weak cry, hoarse and sharp, from beyond the ridge. She scrambled toward it, slipping over wet stone and roots. The noise came again, fainter, closer. She rounded a bend and stopped. Bramble. He lay wedged between two boulders, sides heaving, blood crusting the snow beneath him. His right foreleg was twisted grotesquely, caught in the steel teeth of a trap, old, rusted, likely left behind by a poacher or fur trapper long gone. His fur was soaked with sleet, eyes dim with pain. "God!" she whispered, falling to her knees. He hissed, a wild sound full of fear. But when her hand touched his side, he shuddered and stilled. With trembling fingers, she worked the trap loose. It snapped open with a harsh clang, and Bramble let out a breathless whimper. Blood welled beneath the mangled limb, but no bone showed. Not broken, sprained, lacerated, but alive. She wrapped him in her coat, cradled his shivering frame against her chest, and carried him the 2 miles back to the yurt. Through snow, through exhaustion, through tears. Inside, she stoked the stove until the cabin glowed orange, cleaned the wound, fed him broth from a dropper. He didn't eat much, but he stayed. For days, she hardly left his side. His breathing steadied, the swelling reduced, the leg would heal. But his gaze had changed. He no longer watched her with the wide-eyed awe of a cub to a mother. He watched her with quiet distance, like a fellow animal sizing up a companion. His body healed, but some invisible thread between them had loosened. Then one morning, he didn't curl at her feet. He sat by the yurt door, tail wrapped around his paws, eyes on the rising light filtering through the trees. She opened the door. He stepped out, walked 20 paces, turned. Their eyes met. There was no growl, no purr, no final gesture. Just wind between them. Then he vanished into the trees, the snow parting like it had always waited for him. She didn't cry, not yet. She left the door open that night, and the next, and the one after. But it remained still, empty. Time passed. Seasons shifted. Life moved on. But the wild doesn't always say goodbye. Sometimes it waits, and sometimes it finds its way back. Some loves don't fade. They settle like roots beneath frost, waiting for the right spring. The woman who stayed. 3 years passed like a breath held too long. Allison Ray returned to Redding the way people return to the places that hurt them, quietly, with nothing to prove. Her hair was shorter now, wind-chopped and streaked with silver near the temples. Her frame had grown leaner, her skin bronzed by sun and cold. She wore the same boots, though their soles were nearly gone. She didn't come back for forgiveness. She came back because the forest had given her everything, and then asked for it back. And she'd never truly said goodbye. She parked the same battered pickup at the edge of Main Street and stepped out into a world that hadn't waited for her. Stores had changed hands. Old faces were older. Some were gone entirely. But one thing remained the same. People stared. Not with cruelty, Not this time, with curiosity, because in her absence the legend had grown. A woman vanishing into the wilderness with a bobcat. That alone would have been gossip for years. But when a book appeared on shelves titled The Wild in My Hands, complete with real photos, of paw prints in the snow, of a spotted shadow resting under pine branches, of eyes glowing like amber fire, the whispers turned to wonder. It wasn't just a memoir. It was a love story, one that blurred the lines between feral and faithful, wild and worthy. It went viral, shared in conservation forums, passed from backpacker to biologist. Some readers called her reckless. Others called her brave. A few said she'd made it up entirely. But the photos were real. And so was the ache in every page. Back in town, Frank Lohman, the grizzled old landlord who once warned her with a leather muzzle, now lived in a retirement home. When Allison walked through the doors of Shasta Pines, assisted living with a bag of groceries and a copy of her book in hand, he blinked twice, like seeing a ghost. "You didn't die," he muttered. "Nope," she smiled. Still stubborn. He took the book without a word. Later, he told the nurse, "I was wrong. She didn't tame the wild. She walked beside it." Allison stayed in Redding only a few weeks, long enough to visit the graves of her parents, long enough to fix the fence around the cabin she once called home. It stood empty now, blanketed in dust and overgrown grass. She didn't move back in, she just watched it from a distance. Each evening, she walked the old trails with her camera slung across her back. Not to hunt, not to hope, just to be present. Because the forest still remembered her. The way it quieted when she stepped onto its floor. The way the wind curved around her like recognition. And though she said nothing aloud, her heart carried the same whisper with every step. "If you're still out there, I'm here." And then, on a day that felt like any other, she saw something in the trees. Something with amber eyes. Something she had once called home. Some returns don't come with thunder. Just a heartbeat and a look that says, "I never left." The eyes in the trees. It was late October when it happened. The leaves had turned crisp gold and rust, carpeting the trail behind the old cabin in a hush of memory. Allison walked with her camera slung across her shoulder, but she hadn't taken a single picture all morning. Her boots moved slowly, deliberately, as if the forest beneath them was sacred ground. The light was fading, thin and slanted, the kind that turned everything amber before surrendering to dusk. She stopped near the edge of the ridge, the place where she used to leave scraps of food when Bramble was still young and learning how to stalk. She hadn't been here in over a year. And then she felt it. That old pull in her chest. Like being watched. Not in fear, but recognition. A kind of invisible tether, like when lightning tastes the air before it strikes. She turned. He stood in the tree line, half shrouded by shadow, his body perfectly still. Bramble. He was massive now. Easily 40 pounds, his shoulders broad, coat thick with the coming cold. The rosettes along his flank were darker than she remembered, and a faint limp tugged at his front step, the legacy of that rusted trap. But his eyes were unchanged, amber, ancient knowing. Allison didn't move. She didn't call his name or raise her hand or drop to her knees. She just stood, letting the moment breathe, letting it belong to him. He took one step forward, silent on the leaves. Then another. They were only 10 feet apart now. For a moment, time folded in on itself. She was back in the cabin, holding a wounded kitten in her lap. Back in the yurt, watching him sleep by the stove. Back in the woods, carrying him through snow, heart cracked open like a wound. Then, without a sound, he blinked, turned, and walked away. No drama, no farewell. Just a quiet parting of branches, then a promise etched in silence. "I remember you." Allison stood there long after the trees swallowed him. Not broken, not grieving, at peace, because the wild never promises to stay. But when it comes back, by choice, not command, it says everything you ever needed to hear. Later that night, she returned to the cabin, not to pack, not to leave, to stay. She placed a bowl of fresh water on the porch, not as bait, as respect. She sat on the step beneath the stars and whispered the final words of her story into the wind. He never truly left, and neither did I. The forest answered, as it always had. Not with words, but with presence, with the soft rustle of leaves, with the hush of belonging, with the wild, watching, waiting. The story fades to black, but the bond lingers, etched not in chains, but in choice. Because some souls are wild, and some hearts choose them anyway. In a world that often fears what it doesn't understand, Allison's story reminds us that love, real love, requires courage, patience, and sacrifice. Bramble was never meant to be tamed, and Allison never tried to cage his spirit. Instead, she chose connection over control, trust over fear. Their bond teaches us something deeply human. The relationships that matter most aren't always the easiest or the safest. They're the ones that change who we are. Sometimes, doing what's right means standing alone. Sometimes it means letting go when every part of you wants to hold on. So, what in your life have you been told to walk away from, but your heart can't ignore? Here at Paw Prints and Stories, we believe that the most powerful tales come from the quiet corners of the wild, and from the hearts that dare to listen. If you believe in stories that move souls, challenge fear, and celebrate the extraordinary bond between humans and animals, then you're already part of our journey. So here's your challenge. Find something wild within or around you and choose to care for it, even when the world tells you not to.